Hello there and welcome to the 15th tutorial on beginning Java. Today we're going to take a look at casting. And what is casting? Well, it's just converting. So that's the way you need to think of that. It's just converting. And what are we converting? We're converting variables and objects. And more specifically, we're converting the data types associated with those. And remember those data types like int, float, long, string, double. Remember all those data types we talked about back in, I think it was the second tutorial? Well, in that tutorial, we just defined a data type's value, and that was it. We didn't convert anything. So that's what we're going to be doing here. And what are the four main types of conversions? Well, you can convert an object into another object. You can convert a simple variable into another type of variable. You can also use an object to create a simple variable and vice versa. So there's four ways to do this conversion. So again, converting information to a new form is called casting. And casting produces a new value that is a different type of variable object than its source. So that's the key. You're doing a conversion. You're not actually changing the value. You're just converting it into a new data type or format that you need. So let's start out with the easiest example of casting, and that is casting simple variables to simple variables. So let's do that now. So let's convert a decimal to a whole number. So double, if you remember, is a decimal point. So we'll call this our source. We'll give this a value of 150.05. Nice decimal number. Okay, now as I said, we're going to do a cast to a whole number. You remember an int is a whole number. So the destination, and we're going to say equals. Now here is where we do the cast, and it goes in between these parentheses. Now we specify the data type that we want to convert to right here, and we want to convert this into a int. And then we specify the object up here. So let's review this. We defined a variable source. We made it a decimal point with the double keyword. And then we're going to take that decimal point and convert it into a whole number, because we said to do that right here. So this is where it all takes place. We're saying convert this into a int. And specifically, we're saying take the variable source's value and convert that into an int for destination. Okay, so let's go ahead and print out first source. So we're not doing a cast here. We're just going to go ahead and print this out first, and we should get 150.05. And that was what we expected. Now let's go ahead and do the cast. So we'll go ahead and specify destination now. And look, we got a nice whole number here of 150. What it did was it lopped off this 0.05 and converted it into a nice whole number for us. Now I want to point out a little caveat here, and Java always has these little nuances and caveats that you need to be aware of. Let's go ahead and make this 0.9999999. Now you would expect that to be rounded up to 151, right? Wrong. It actually will round it down to 150. So keep that in mind. It always gets rounded down, not up. And if you had close to $151 million, you might be a little bit angry right now if that got rounded down that way. But that's the way Java does it, and we should get 150. So that's the way that works. Okay, so let's put a little comment here. So we said this was a variable to variable cast. There we go. Let's do another variable to variable cast because I want to make another point here. So we'll take an int, we will call that I equals, and we'll give this a value of 125. And we're going to convert this into a byte this time, and we're going to call that byte B. And remember, here's where we do the cast, and this is where we specify the object that we're casting from. So we're taking I's value of 125, its int value of 125, and converting that into a byte. And let's also go ahead and put our comments in here, variable to variable cast, and let's go ahead and print out B. And let's run this. Okay. And you see we get 125. Now you might be asking, well, what did I do here? Well, this was an int, and it came out now as a byte, even though it's the same number. Remember, we don't change the number. This is just now a byte that comes out of this. Now, here's why I'm actually doing this example. I want to point out to you that these data types here have ranges of values. So an int range, and let's put that, actually let's go ahead and make another comment here. An int range, numeric range, is from, I think it's like negative 2 billion. I don't know if this is exactly it, but negative 2 billion to 2 billion. You get the idea here. And a bytes range is much smaller. So I think it's minus 127 to plus 127, something like that. So the point I'm trying to make here is when you're doing a cast from one data type to another, you have to be aware of these range of values. And what I mean by that is it's a lot harder to take a larger range value and cast that into a data type that has a much smaller range. You have to be very careful. So this worked because this 125 here is within both of these ranges. But what if we move this to 1,255? You'll notice we got a really funky number here, negative 25. Now what happened there was Java assumed, well, you must know what you're doing, so I'm going to go ahead and try to refactor this and work this thing out. And that's why you get that funky result. So that's why you have to be very careful when you're going ahead and downcasting. The preferred way to cast is have the int below and the byte above here. Now if we flip those, it would have worked out just fine. But that's what you have to be aware of. When you're taking a larger range data type and casting that into a smaller data type, you have to make sure they fit or you're going to get some unexpected results, and that is certainly not the way you want to code. Okay, so let's go ahead and move along here. Now we're going to work with objects and how to move values from one object to a variable and vice versa. So we'll take an object's value and put that into a variable first. So we're going to say, let's do our thing. This is an object, and let's go over here. So we're going to declare a new object here. New integer, and let's give this a value of 400. Now let's define the variable that we're going to dump this number into. So let's do a int. We're just going to call this destination. Now what I want to point out here is we can't use this traditional way that we used up here when we went variable to variable. We can't use this parenthesis and specify the type. Objects do not work that way. You can't do that one-to-one. You actually have to use the class's methods in order to do the convert. So we're going to take this whole number that we defined up here, this object, and we should get some IntelliSense here. Now I have to find this. It's int value. This is what we want. And so this is a method that we're pulling from this guy to go ahead and do this convert. So you have to remember, we have to use methods. We can't do this in the traditional way. And then we go ahead and hit. I've done something wrong here. Oh, for the love of God, we already used destination up here. Okay, so let's go ahead and just call this DEST. There we go. That'll clear that up. So let's go ahead and run this, and I expect to get a value of 400 here, and it'll be placed into this variable. So let's run this. And of course we forgot to change this down here. Sorry. All kinds of errors here. All right, so let's go ahead and rerun this. And there we get 400. So that's how that works. Now, and let's put in some comments here. This is the variable. Now we're going to flip this. We're going to go from a variable into an object. So let's go ahead and flip this. Now I do want to point out one thing here really quickly. This method is coming from the integer class here. Remember, this is a pre-canned class from Java. So we're using this method from this class to do this. Okay, just to point that out. Now, as I said, let's reverse this. Let's do a string this time. So let's actually take the value from a string and let's turn that into an integer. So we're going to go ahead and call this string variable val. We're going to say this is equal to, and let's give it a number. And we'll do our comment, this is a variable, because we're doing the opposite thing here. So let's declare our int object, and we'll just say int object. Now again, we have to use a method to do this, and we're going to have to use the integers method to go ahead and accomplish this conversion. So we're going to specify integer dot, and I need to look for this now. I believe it is parse int. That's what we want. You'll notice how it was smart enough to take the variable that we defined here and plug it in here. So let's go ahead and run this. But first, let's not make the same mistake we did last time. Let's print out int object. And let's run this. And we got 47. Now, I want to point out what happened here. This was a string. It comes out on this side as now a whole number, an int of 47. Now, the other thing I want to point out to you is this will only work if this string has numerics in it. This is a numeric string. Look what happens if we put in some characters in here and we rerun this. Look, we're going to get exceptions because obviously a C cannot be converted into a number. So this type of scenario, again, will only work if you have numeric numbers in here. Okay, I want to make one final point here. Between the difference between implicit casting and explicit casting. Now, up to now, we've been doing explicit casting, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Right here, we said convert this to a byte. And what I mean by explicit is we can see that it's doing that. We are explicitly saying, I want you to convert this to a byte, and it's obvious to us. It's right there. It's right in front of us. So think of it like that. It's just something you can see that we're doing. Implicit casting is where you remove the parentheses. We'll put some comments here. This is explicit cast. And remember, it's visual. We can see that we're doing it. We actually typed byte out, and we know exactly what's going on. So just think of it like that. Okay, so let's go move down here, and we'll do a implicit cast, and I'll show you how that works. So actually, you know what? Let's fix this up here so that works if you want to run that as an example again. So let's define an int. Let's just say x equals 47. And let's do a double now. We'll do actually some arithmetic here. So let's do y equals 3.5. And we'll do another double of xy equals x plus y. Good, there we go. And we actually have to get our system.out.print and put xy here. So let me explain what's going on here. You'll notice I added an arithmetic operator here. So at the time these get added, this x here has to be converted to a decimal. So that is the implicit cast. At the time this gets executed, this x will need to be a decimal. We didn't actually tell it to do that. Java is just going ahead and making that assumption for us. So you have to be very careful when you do implicit casting. And like I said, another easy way to think of this is we just don't see it. We didn't actually type out, whereas an explicit cast, as I mentioned before, we go ahead and type out exactly what we're doing. So let's go ahead and run this. And we got 50.5, which I expected. Alrighty then. I want to point out one thing before we close this video. You see this integer up here when we were converting this object into a variable, the value? All the basic data types of Java have a corresponding object. So int, the data type int, has a corresponding object in Java that you can reference. And that's what I was doing here when I did this. And it's the same for character. That has a corresponding object as well. And it's the same for byte. So you can just go ahead and reference these as objects because they're pre-canned objects that Java supplies. So again, each data type has a corresponding object in Java as well that you can use. So that's what I was doing here when I was using this integer. Okay, that's going to wrap it up for this tutorial. Please be sure to check out the rest of my Java tutorials on my YouTube channel, EJ Media. See you guys later.